This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My guest today is Jacob Cooper. Jacob, it is so wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for the good work that you're doing, and
Oh,
thank you for having me on as your honored guest. I'm a big fan, of your
oh, and
work.
I'm a fan of yours as well. And I have so many questions for you. But before we get to that, I want to start with your near-death experience. Can you tell us about it?
I love sharing it. I've been sharing it now for around, 10 years now. I started probably my mid-20s sharing my story, and each time I share it, my goal is to take the viewers with me. The goal is for me to not hold on to this thing, but to have this as a part of others people's experience. But, I had my NDE September of 1993. To give my age away, I was just 3 years old at the time, and I come from the rich Jewish tradition, and so we were preparing. My family was preparing at the time for the time of the high holidays, which is a time in which the soul is, manifesting itself for the new year and ready to really meet the Creator and cleaning its kind of sins to really get pure. Little did I know that I was about to meet the Creator, but it was far beyond the confines of the religious sense. It was a direct experience with the Creator. At the time, at this time, I had a condition called pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough. But my parents, did not know this. I just had this cough, and I went not with my parents, but with my family friends. We went to a playground, nearby where they lived, and I started to climb the ladder of this playground. And each rung of this climb, my breathing, became a lot more belabored due to this whooping cough. And at the time that I got to the top on the slide, everything shut down in my body, including my brain. Now, there's a lot to unload here, but certainly suffocation is one way that people die, and most people die that way unless it's traumatic, you know, occurrence. So for me, my so to speak, death happened due to suffocation, deprivation of oxygen. And so I tried to breathe in and nothing was happening. It's as if you're drowning, you're trying to hold on to a log and there's no log to hold on to and you're just drowning. And it was very, very scary because the breath really keeps us alive unless you're on a ventilator, which we saw isn't always as effective during the COVID era. So literally nothing to hold on to. I was purely suffocating. And so rather than just staying in my body, it wouldn't make sense. Like if you're in a car and your car's not working to just continuously gun the engine, you're going to go out, check out the hood, and kind of see what's going on. And so for myself, that's kind of what I happened. I had an awareness far beyond, my body and my brain by being in the disembodied state. And then I just really decided to surrender to this, what I refer to as this breath of eternity, which, the Jewish faith, the word for spirit is known as ruach, which translates as the wind or the breath of God. And so when I had my own breath taken away from me, I surrendered to this breath of eternity. And I had a lot of the classic reference near death experiences that, Dr. Raymond Moody highlights that are more of the mystical nature. They're more the euphoric sense. I know some people have distressing NDEs, which maybe we could get into that as well. But I had, definitely a euphoric, mystical near-death experience. And this near-death experience, the best way I could describe it is imagine the greatest moment of your life, the most euphoric moment of moment of your life, and multiply that by an infinite rate. And that's what I felt. I felt myself, ascending up on this roller coaster of elevation. And I felt this vibrational, increase, where there was no beginning, there was no middle, there was no end. There was no beginning, middle, or end, or time of euphoria, of how good I felt. And this body, we're not used to that. We're used to saying, hey, I'll go to this Indian buffet and I'll feel a certain level of, of good sensations in this moment, but there's always seeming like a limitation because we're bioneurochemical, and so we have like a limit being this finite body. And when you're out of the finite, you're in the infinite, and there's no limitations with it. And so I felt myself ascending up to an infinite rate into the right side of my head, which I know now corresponds to wisdom, creativity, intuition. I felt this incredible, immaculate golden palace, which was shimmering with light, and I was able to see beautiful sounds coming out of this. And when I went into this palace, I just knew it was a representation of all that there ever is, ever was, ever will be, where all of life itself, emanated from. And the best way I could describe it in the vernacular that we have, is God, which is a very limiting word because it has religious connotations to it. But I was able to really connect with God, which to me is this endless, energetic apex, endless apex of love, of euphoria, of beauty that has no possible cap to its end. It's unlimited, and how beautiful and loving it is, and all of life in its purest form flows from that energetic source. And I really felt myself, starting to have like two things occurring at the same time. At the same time, I was being able to really experience this through the depths of my soul, but I still had a connection to my 3-year-old self, and I was just had questions. What would I look like, in this lifetime? What would this life be like? I just wanted, just felt like I had unfinished business, and I wanted to really know what this life would be like. And I started to have concerns of my parents, if I were to cross over on the other side. And then moments later, I had awareness of what's, referred to, what I now know as Christ consciousness, which is, something that goes beyond Jesus Christ himself. I know a lot of near-death experiencers, talk about Jesus, himself, but this to me went far beyond, Jesus himself. This was an octave on the other side that was, almost the highest possible octave or sound or just frequency. When I think of the other side, I think of energy and I think of frequency. And so when I connected to this energetic frequency in Christ consciousness, I was able to really have a reassurance that all is well, was well, and will be well, so to speak. And that's certainly something very foreign than what we're used to. As I always reference Lao Tzu. He would talk about how in the future anxiety is promoted, and the past sadness, is promoted, and this moment is where peace is found. And I felt this endless moment of peace and of euphoria, and I was able to let go of my worries, my fears, my judgments. And I just know that for all of us, at the end of the day, all is well. And that's something that we forget here on this journey. And moments later, I felt my spirit guides with me. I had a male guide and a female guide, and it's the one detail of my near-death experience that I struggle to remember for some reason their particular individual names. I just call them the guides at this point. I feel them with me every step of the journey, but they were beyond beautiful, the guides. And when I looked to the right side and the left side of me, they were with me. And, you know, the analogy that I, often bring is, imagine like you have like an infatuation with some Hollywood celebrity or something like that. You feel, wow, this person is totally out of my league. Like they're in a totally different stratosphere. Now imagine that amplified by an infinite rate, but also imagine that being has the same degree of love and admiration that you have for them that they have for you. And that's kind of what I felt. I'm like, there's a part that we walk around this human experience with this small version of who we are, and we carry that around. But in the spirit realm, we are seen so much differently than those see us on the earth plane, and how we see ourselves in the construct of the egoic nature. And I just felt unconditional love and embracing, and it was just an incredible homecoming with my spirit guides. And then I felt my guides, guiding me down this slide in this park, in this playground that I was on, and I saw my body on the ground, irresponsive to people around me. Um, and they were just poking my body, calling my name, and I felt my body was on the ground, but I felt my form of myself was to the side of it. And so I could understand how loved ones feel when they're trying to connect to us and trying to, send us messages and wisdom and all this kind of stuff, and they're just trying to shake us. That they could see us, but we can't really see them sometimes. And so But the people at the playground that I was with, I was able to really look at their energy. And, what I understand now looking back on it is at its core, all is spiritual. Sometimes we have associations with those that we identify as spiritual via the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, Jesus, Buddha, whatever it is. But at our core, we all come from spirit. We go to spirit. We're connected to spirit. Just some, remember that and they have a full expression of who they are. They don't forget who they are and they continually build on that reality. And so, but I was able to really see all around me a spirit. I was able to see their angels, their auric, electromagnetic fields around them, and it was incredible. And then I just looked up, and there was an infinite array and sea of angels that was just floating right in front of me at this time, and that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, arguably. So, um, the angels. I know people talk about archangels, and there's different levels of angels, but these were very youthful in their presentation, and what I think is referred to as cherubs or childlike angels that I saw. And, maybe it was the fact that I was a child that these angels came to me, who knows? But when I saw them, kind of different than the spirit guides, these cherubim, these childlike angels, were just floating, and there was just like an infinite amount of them, and they were kind of like a bronze gold type color. And when I looked at them, I could hear their beautiful sound and their colors, and their beauty, but they were sending healing and love to the entire planet. And so, whereas the spirit guides were more focused on myself, these angels weren't really so much connected to me. They were more focused on the overlaying macro, energetic field. And so, they were all around the playground. It was just this thin veil of separation that separated these angels that are always around us that we don't really see. It's just this thin veil, and then I had a lot of classic experiences of near-death experiencers where I was able to really have my soul family that came forward, as well as the most difficult moment of my NDE, which was outside the suffocation, the pre-NDE, which was the question of, would I stay or go? And I know, most near-death experiencers, I'd probably say 70% are told, no, it's not your time. You have more work to do, stuff like that. And for myself, I was given autonomy as to what I would do. And I said, well, if I am to stay, what is this life going to be like? Would it be worth it? Why am I here? And so I was shown like this wide panoramic view of my life in this life through the lens of not only myself but through others. And this is known as what's called as a life review, which is common with a lot of near-death experiencers. We understand the ripple effect that how what you do to another, you really do it to on yourself, or either spectrum. And so this life review not only occurred in this lifetime, but it went beyond this lifetime, and I experienced life reviews beyond just this lifetime in past life memories that I was having. And so I saw myself just spanning the entire planet and globe and being able to have other different memories and existences from culture to culture and civilization to civilization. And there was one particular lifetime, which hopefully we could get to at a later point, that really stuck with me that I feel is very closely related, to my near-death experience. But this was a beautiful moment, which I recognized and remembered, hey, I'm not just this 3-year-old kid. I've had, hundreds of lifetimes that go beyond this. And so that makes things a little bit complicated, later on in my integration of it. But then I was able to see myself, in the life that I would do and speaking in front of people, and I saw that, I was, bringing a lot of this information forward to people and helping a lot of people out. And I saw myself speaking in front of a crowd, which was later validated by people who just came up to me, later in life and saw what I saw without having me getting public at all about my near-death experience. And so they were reminders of this work that I would do. And, I also highlight some, future visions that I had, which is including life after breath, which is, some of the stuff that we're occurring right now, but this great kind of transformation that people are having, this awakening that people are having that I was, agreed to be a part of. And so I just thought, as beautiful as heaven and the other side is, this unique moment to bring forward, this reality to this earth plane is something that I can't deny. And so at that moment, I agreed to stay, and everything left my immediate awareness, and I was just fled with immediate regret after that. I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? And stuff like that. And the guides and the angels and all my loved ones reassured me to really trust in the power of spirit, to trust in the plan, that is there, to trust in how my thoughts could align with this plan, and trust the process, so to speak. And then that's when, everything dissipated and I was rushed to an ambulance and I woke up in a hospital bed. And, the rest is history, and just in terms of making sense of this. So that's a bit of the short of my NDE, and I highlight it a lot more within both of my books, which we'll get into, Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. But, you know, um, I'm sure there's a lot of questions that you may have, and I know areas that may be thought provocative to a lot of viewers, because this is a little bit of a different and near-death experience in a sense of the age that I was, and some of the things that I experienced. But hey, it's good to be different. That's how we're adding to change and to have people reevaluate their lives and how they look at the nature of consciousness.
Now, did you recall this throughout your childhood, or was this something that sort of faded over time?
It was always there. It's like if you watch a movie, there's like, you know, Harry Potter is always like the star of the show. Sometimes Harry is featured, sometimes he's in the background, whatever, but he's always, a part of the Harry Potter series. And for me, my life was like that. This was, a governing force in my life. And sometimes it was more intense, sometimes less intense, but it was always there. It wasn't until I was probably in my early 20s, my first, actually 20 years old, I would say, to be specific, like my first year of college, where I started getting back into yoga and meditation and all this stuff. And I was, gifted a book by a good family friend, or actually she's my technical godmother. And the book is called Embraced by the Light by Betty Eadie. And this book was gifted to me. And after reading Betty's book, that was when I was like, a light bulb hit, and I was like, oh my God, this occurs to other people. There's a term for this. Other people had this. I just thought that I was just alone in this. And so that's common for near-death experiencers. I know, Hollywood's, depicts like, heaven is for real, where that boy just shouts what happens to him and tells everyone. That does happen, but it also occurs where near-death experiencers have something so sacred that they keep it so close to themselves, because words don't do justification, and as well as the timing is everything, but it also takes around 20 to 30 years for infants and children to really integrate and process their near-death experience, according to people like PMH Atwater, who specializes in infant and children near-death experiencers. So there's a lot, but it certainly drastically impacted my life on a plethora of ways.
I also read Betty's book, and that was the first thing that introduced me
Yeah.
to near death
Wow.
experiences. And
Oh.
I was fascinated from that point on. You mentioned digging in a little bit deeper to some of the things you saw for past lives. So, can you take us into some of that?
In Life After Breath, I speak about some, a couple different past lives that I had, but one of the most recent lifetime that I have, which has had, you know, I've been to evidential intuitives, and one intuitive that I went to. This has been happening through a multitude of intuitives that have picked up on this, but one intuitive picked up exactly what I saw in the life that I experienced in my last life. And this is something that I experienced not only in my NDE, but I had subsequent dreams, as well as, memories, spontaneous past life memories throughout my childhood, of this particular lifetime. But I think it's very closely related to my near-death experience, in which, I work in the mental health field, as some viewers know, and so this is obviously a sensitive topic, but I think it's important to speak about, because there's such a great deal of stigma on this particular area. But I had a lifetime which I will say that I completed suicide. I'm not going to say committed suicide, because you don't commit a heart attack, you don't commit cancer. I don't criminalize mental health. We try to treat it and we try to empathize with it. We don't judge it. And so I, you know, completed suicide in this last lifetime and just remembered the students that I was connected to in this lifetime came to me, my NDE, and I just became emotional when I had a reunion with them. But I just remembered how my back was against the wall. There was no hope. I felt the allegorical sense of suffocation this lifetime. And, I could, it's influenced the work that I do, obviously dealing, with high level of mental health acuity and people who, may have their own, degrees of ideations or attempts, and stuff like that. So for myself, there's a lot of karmic value in the work that I do today, working in the mental health field. But I think it was also allegorical for what I experienced in my near-death experience, where a sense that I felt that same sensation where I suffocated due to whooping cough, and I felt there was no hope. Like I said before, I felt like I was drowning. There was literally nothing to grab or to hold on to. And so rather than continuously grabbing on for empty straws, I had a different reaction to this, board on the chess piece, this piece on the chessboard, where instead of trying to force something that wasn't there, I did the ultimate power move where I surrendered, which in our society is quite stigmatized. We view surrender as giving in the white flag or just kind of giving up. But I think surrender really is giving in to your inner power that goes beyond tragedy, that goes beyond struggle, that goes beyond trauma. And so I think whether that's mental health, whether that's recovery, surrender is key to really transcending your experience and in allowing some of these shake-up experiences of your life to transcend you, to a greater strength and a greater gear within. And so I let go of my human breath and I surrendered to the breath of eternity. And that really allowed me to propel myself through this near-death experience.
There are people listening who have lost a loved one to suicide and they're worried that they're being punished. So, from your experience, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, certainly if I was punished, I wouldn't be here right now. I think I'd be condemned in the fires of hell through eternity. So, um, what I will say to those loved ones is that's a very rational thought. I think within our belief systems of God influence our behaviors and our outlooks. So I think sometimes if we grow up with a belief system that God is this, abusive, chauvinistic, narcissistic, high school principal or policeman or parent, then we'll, view it that way. I think sometimes there's a great deal of projection on authority, with God as the ultimate, so to speak, authoritarian figure. But I experience there's a diametric difference of God that what we experience in this human level. When I experienced God in my NDE, it was the highest form of love that went far beyond this earth reality. And there's a part of us, we call that the divine spark, that's forever connected, to God. And so what type of all-loving being would kick us when we're down? What type of all-loving being would shun away its own creation, its own part of itself? And so there is no necessarily condemnation or judgment when it comes to that. There's only an opportunity to evolve and learn, and more importantly, healing that needs to take place. And I think when people think of suicide, they just think it's mental health. It's not solely just mental health. It could be something physically that happened. I mean, I know I had a grandmother that was hit by a truck in her later years, or I believe like a post mail, something like that, and that impacted her physical health. And probably 2 or 3 months before I was born, she made that decision, and just she's since come through in readings, and she's okay. So, you know, I think suicide, there's a great deal of stigma, but what people forget is they look at it and they judge. They say, "Wow, that person must have been so weak," or they're a coward, and all this stuff. And there's a lot of judgment. What people don't understand is the amount of strength that it might have taken that person to live each moment to get on to the next day. So I think people who struggled with this, condition, they have incredible strength in themselves. And suicide does not mean they're weak people, that they're giving up. It just means at a certain point, the pain, overrided a lot of parts of themselves. So I want that to remember that, but certainly there's no judgment. And I remember when I saw myself, completing suicide, there was ultimate love. I crossed over. I didn't have judgment. So certainly, um, being in the mental health field, we do what we can at all costs to avoid suicide because that's not a road that you necessarily want to go down. But if it is that road that you choose, that's your path, life is an eternal school. And so there's forgiveness, there's healing that does happen, but it's from completion you begin. And so there's no running away from where you're, what you're experiencing. And so certainly my lifetime, I experienced that sensation that, sometimes you could try to end the pain, but not necessarily the lesson that you have. And so I think the way to really clear the wound is to enter it, and that's how we really find the light and find the healing at a certain point. So I believe all souls have the ability to transcend their pain, but it's by going through it that we're able to transcend it many times.
Well, thank you, Jacob. I have a lot more questions for you. I want to talk more about what you saw in terms of the future. I'd also like to cover just more about hellish near-death experiences, that sort of thing. But let's go ahead and take that into part 2. Thanks so much for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. That was part 1. Make sure to listen to part 2. And if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more episodes.